This is The Rational Optimist, Frank S. Robinson blog on life, society, politics, philosophy. This was so this was tweeted by Richard Dawkins, correct? Didn't write the article, but posted it. So it would seem right over here. Transgender Wars via Frank S. Robinson with 32 followers. Nice. All right, well, it's something that Richard Dawkins believes in. So Richard Dawkins recently had some kind of humanitarian reward revoked because of his anti-trans statements, right? That happened, right? It happened. I remember it. I just want to say, like, up front, it is really sad watching people who used to garner a lot of respect falling on the sword because they can't wrap their minds around the whole trans thing. I really do think that most opposition to trans people is rooted in some kind of like deep-seated emotional response. For some people, it's disgust. For some people, it's like indignation. For some people, it's confusion. I don't blame people for being confused. Unironically, if you were born in the 1960s, you've spent your whole life with a very rigid understanding of how people should present. And then in what basically feels like the past 10 years, obviously trans people have been around forever, but what feels like has just been in the past 10 years. All of a sudden, kablamo, the walls come down, the whole building explodes, and people are running around with 6 penises? It's crazy out there, you know? I don't blame them for being a little bit confused, or maybe even a little bit like hesitant with the whole thing. But I feel like a lot of the people who used to define themselves by being pro facts and logic have tricked themselves into buying the reactionary mantra that being anti-trans is somehow some kind of pro-science position, when in fact the science overwhelmingly supports the general progressive position on the issue. So people who, value the aesthetic of being factually correct end up getting themselves in some trouble, I just want to read what this is like. Changing gender wasn't even a thing until the 20th century. This is a very white statement. My goodness. This new concept discombobulated many minds with hostility towards trans people. But now, happily, they've won the argument over their right to be themselves. In fact, we seem to have gone to the other extreme. Oh man, this got retweeted by Richard Dawkins? Transgender issues have become a minefield of political correctness with a pitiless orthodoxy one mustn't question. This is a really standard talking point for reactionaries. A really, really standard one, okay? Basically, the line is this. I'm glad they have rights and all, but now they've gone too far. That's kind of the predominant attitude they tend to take. They did the same thing, by the way, with the civil rights movement, like, oh, okay, we've got rid of slavery and that's good, but like, this is crazy. You're gonna make society all black people. Like, they would make these arguments with basically every minority group. And they seem to resent the idea. Yeah, they did the same thing with gay people. They seem to resent the idea that there's any kind of orthodoxy they're expected to follow. But man, sometimes orthodoxy is good, okay? When I'm out in public, all right, and like if there's some white dude on the street screaming the N-word at a black person, okay, I want people to just by default think that's bad, There's a time for like questioning the things that you believe, and there's a time for introspection. But as a general rule, there are social practices that we adopt kind of as a default, you know what I mean? And I'm totally okay with being deferentially pro-trans being one of those, People say there's some kind of crazy trans orthodoxy, but then they go ahead and say the left constantly infights. And if you've been a part of the left, you see how no two leftists can agree on a definition of gender. So, is it orthodoxy? What are we... Is it? Is that orthodoxy? I don't think so. No, it's just people have strong convictions about human rights, something that Richard Dawkins used to care about. Here are the biological facts. Ooh! Standard female. I use standard to describe most people, others reflecting naturally occurring differences. Wait! How can you pretend to be scientifically, biologically accurate, and then use standard, which has highly normative connotations, as a descriptor for females? We already have a scientific term for what you're describing here. It's called cisgender. That's the term that a biologist would use. But you don't want to sound like a progressive, so you have to use the... I'm sorry, I only believe in trans women and normal women. That's my very scientific way of assessing this situation. Yeah, like, okay. Have two X chromosomes, males and X and a Y. These genes guide development of an embryo's sex characteristics. Male and female anatomies differ, as does the brain software accompanying each. Deploying all this in utero is a complex, tricky process, and glitches can occur. Oh shit, trans people. You're like a glitch in the Matrix. Okay? Oh god. They're gonna send the agents after you, okay? No wonder. Holy shit. No wonder the trans murder rate is so high. It's fucking Agent Smith running around the world cleaning up the glitches. Um, no, it's Mr. Anderson, or should I say, Mrs. No, it's not funny. It's a little funny since The Matrix is a trans allegory, but you know. Anyway, I do appreciate the fact that when reactionaries type stuff like this out, they say it as though any progressives would disagree with them. You guys notice that, right? When like anti-trans types, they like put their hands against their hips and they're like, there are biological differences between males and females, as if like anyone disagrees with them. As if there's like anybody out there who would argue against that point. By implication, they're suggesting that we disagree with that, but you know. Obviously, for reproduction's sake, standard brain software tells men to mate with women, and vice versa. But sometimes variant software gives you same-sex attraction. It's not a choice. Try to imagine yourself choosing it. I can't believe Richard Dawkins tweeted this. More rare is a mismatch between anatomy and brain structure. A genetic and anatomical female can get a male brain and feel male in their heads. This is called gender dysphoria. No, that's not what that means. Not a psychological condition, it's actually biological. It tends to show up quite early in life because males and females are raised and acculturated differently, and no psychotherapy can talk it away. Though, of course, some people try to fight it or deny it and to live with it. All right, well, hold on. I appreciate the fact that they're saying that psychotherapy can't undo gender dysphoria. I mean, at least we have that here, right? Because that's a really common conservative talking point. Like, I support the transes right to go get some health care to fix their dumb brains. But I don't think we're getting that here necessarily, maybe. But now it can be rectified. Such children are typically given puberty blocker medication to delay sexual maturation until an age when they can make an informed choice to undergo sex change treatment. That at least is the idea. We'll get back to this. Okay, wait, that's actually a pretty accurate description of what puberty blockers do. I was normally it's like puberty blockers are given to 4-year-olds to turn them into asexual monstrosities, you know, so it's a little less sensationalist here, maybe. We're taking what we can. Previously, gender dysphoria did seem quite rare, less so now with all the attention and ready access to treatment. In fact, it's acquired a kind of cachet. Is that how we... a seal used especially as a mark of official approval? Well, with transitioning not just accepted, but even made attractive. So now we're seeing an epidemic of late onset gender dysphoria. Oh no, we've got the term. Showing up during puberty and adolescence, mostly girls coming out as trans males. Is this person a British person? This is a really common talking point from Britbongers. Late onset gender dysphoria. And today's society is very supportive of their choice, indeed hostile towards any impediments. So again, we're doing the thing again. All these kids are turning into transes, and anyone who says, whoa, hold on, we should think about this first, gets beaten up by marauding crowds of pro-trans progressives. No. No matter what people will try to tell you, the rate of detransitioning is really, really low. And if you actually look at the rates of detransition and why they're caused, you'll find that most people detransition because they can no longer afford to transition, or because they want to preserve some aspects of the reproductive system so their children can be biologically theirs. Those are the two main reasons why people detransition. Detransitioning doesn't mean you're like, I want to go back to being a boy, and they pull the switch. It means that in some way, shape, or form, you are pulling back from the transition system you've got going on, or lack of support. Yeah, sometimes it's also just like people feel dejected, but they don't actually indicate they regret what's taken place. So not only is the rate of detransition quite low, but the rate of detransition caused by regret is vanishingly low. That's not to say that it doesn't happen, and any false positive is really, really unfortunate. Should be addressed as best as we can, but the idea that it's an epidemic is just not true. They're often moved straight away to puberty blockers and or hormonal treatments on a path to surgery. That is not true. There are no young people being moved straight away to puberty blockers. The process for getting it on these lists and getting on lists for hormone treatment are stringent and lengthy, okay? Nobody is going down to the doctor's office and then walking out of there with titty skittles, all right? That shit is just not happening. In one Australian case, a child was removed from parents who resisted. Anyone know which case this is referring to? Because I have a strong feeling that the state didn't separate a child from their parents just because the parents didn't want to get them treatment for something. I have a feeling there might have been some other element to this case, Like people who say that that dad got his custody of the child removed because he wouldn't let their child wear a dress. And it turns out it was actually because the dad violated a court order, you know? But hold on. These years are emotionally and psychologically tumultuous, even for standard kids. Any length you'll go to avoid using the term cisgender. Wrestling with their emerging sexuality and personal identity is especially sensitive to social pressures and their place in a peer group. Now bombard them with positive messages about transsexuality. The internet full of it. Trans kids showered with affirmation, making it look hip, cool, chic. This is the exact same argument for gay people. This is identical to the argument for gay people. How do people not recognize it's not just a parallel. We're not talking about two parallel ideas. These are just two lines that sit on top of the same place in space. These are the exact same arguments. Trans kids shower with affirmation, making it look cool, hip, chic, while standardhood, Jesus, is so dull. Convincing yourself that your confusing sexual feelings might mean you're trans seems like a great way to get attention, cut through the fog, and assert an edgy personal identity. Man, do they really think that people just turn trans for clout? There's no data supporting this. I don't know why they keep making this claim. How can you pretend to be a logic science bro? Nobody makes this claim. We used to have the term drama queen. Parents who suspect something like this are dismissed as bigots. It's a pretty bigoted perspective, yeah. But they may be right, seeing not truly biologically based gender dysphoria, but a self-induced simulacrum, which with no medical interventions, many youngsters in due course get over. Studies indicate between 61 and 98% of even early onset cases, once reaching adulthood with all the life changes that entail, wind up accommodated with their genetic genders at all. Hey guys, this is the statistic that guy cited during the last Hippy Dippy panel, right here. So what this statistic is every child demonstrating any signs of gender nonconformity, the extent to which they transition afterwards. This is the wrong statistic right here. The real statistic is of children or young people or whatever who are given some kind of transgender healthcare, how many of them end up regretting it? The answer is very, very few. This is only saying like maybe your kid wore like nail polish for a bit, but they later were comfortable being a boy. So, transgenders owned. It's all the same talking points. You know what? What's the point? Haven't we addressed basically every anti-trans argument by this point? I feel like we, because it's not a huge topic. I feel like once you get right down to it, there's usually only about a half dozen arguments that are thrown at progressives, and I feel like I know all this. You guys know them too, because this author's a lawyer, of course. Only a lawyer could demonstrate that level of bullheaded confidence in something they know nothing about. Do you want the links to the Australian case? Yeah, give me a link. I want to see. They don't have many arguments that work, Vosh. All they have is fear-mongering. Well, it's really nice. Do you guys remember the stats we went over where every country's relative support of trans people was measured? Trans people are getting, like, super accepted all over the world. It's not It's not a done deal, but, you know, it seems like in terms of the big progressive war, trans people have basically won, or at least that they're on the front foot, and it's just a matter of time before their acceptance becomes more normalized. That'll take decades, but in the meantime, things are gonna, I think, generally get better. And that'll remain the case, I think, as long as our society remains relatively stable. Progressive rights tend to backslide during times of great crisis.